Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're unpacking a state that is so vast, so influential, and just so layered that saying its name,
Yep.
it brings up these immediate images, global finance, huge buildings, this like relentless energy.
Right.
We are, of course, talking about New York, the Empire State.
And if you're like most people, when you hear New York, your mind just immediately goes to Manhattan, the skyline, Times Square.
Of course.
But the real subject of our deep dive today is the entire state, which is, well, it's a powerful study in just profound contradiction.
100%.
You have this global financial, media, and cultural epicenter running right up against some of the largest tracts of protected wilderness in the entire country.
And that duality, that contradiction, is exactly why we need to do this. Our mission today is to move far beyond that obvious New York City skyline and quickly but thoroughly understand the physical, the historical, and the economic forces that really shaped this powerhouse state.
Yeah.
And we're going to focus on some surprising facts and its enduring influence.
It truly is an empire built on advantage. I mean, think about the raw numbers for a second. New York is the fourth most populous state in the nation. We're talking nearly 20 million residents.
Right.
Yet by sheer land area, it's only 27th largest. So that spatial and population imbalance, that's the master key to understanding its politics, its economy.
And that enduring cultural schism you mentioned.
Exactly.
And that nickname, the Empire State, it wasn't just earned through population density. The sources really emphasize it was earned through, well, early economic dominance and these truly incomparable advantages in transport and trade.
Advantages that were literally carved into the landscape centuries ago. And the sources confirm that concentration is everything here. Roughly 2/3 of those 20 million people live within the New York metropolitan area.
Okay, so define that for us.
That's New York City, Long Island, and the lower Hudson Valley. We need to explore how this high-density core interacts with and, sometimes clashes with the enormous geographic remainder of the state.
Okay, let's do it. Let's unpack this monumental state, starting with the very physical ground that creates these two vastly different worlds. We have to start with the Great Divide that really defines New York identity. Upstate versus downstate. I mean, this informal, often contentious separation, it drives almost all of the state's internal politics. Right?
It's so much more than a geographic line. It's a cultural chasm. So downstate, that's the high-density economic engine. It includes New York City, the lower Hudson Valley, stretching up to about Poughkeepsie.
Okay.
And crucially, it also includes Long Island. Now, the sources highlight this, and it's an amazing fact. Long Island, an area only 118 miles long, is the single most populous island in the entire United States.
Wow.
It holds nearly 40% of the state's total population.
40% on that one island. That's
Yep.
a concentration it's hard to even picture. So if you combine New York City and Long Island, you've got way over half the state's population.
Well over half. You're
Mhm.
talking over 11 million people living in a relatively small coastal zone. And this means upstate, which is, everything else, all of that vast 27th largest area, is a fundamentally different place.
A completely different world.
Precisely. Upstate New York is everything else, stretching hundreds of miles from the Great Lakes in the west, bordering Pennsylvania, all the way across to Lake Champlain and the Vermont border. And this area, it presents this spectacular tapestry of terrain that few states can match.
So walk us through that. We're not just talking about rolling hills here.
We are certainly not. The terrain starts with the Allegheny Plateau, which dominates what they call the southern tier. That's basically the northern reach of Appalachia. Then moving east, you hit the Catskill Mountains, another ancient part of that wider Appalachian chain, in the south-central part of the state, famous, of course, for its old resort towns and natural beauty.
But the really rugged, defining geography is further north, isn't it? The land that most New York City residents, well, they probably never even see.
Yes, the vast, truly wild region is defined by the mighty Adirondack Mountains. But, and this is key to understanding the state's early economic history, you have two vital waterways. The Mohawk River Valley, which provides this stunningly rare natural east-west corridor.
Ah, okay.
And it flows directly into the north-south artery, the Hudson River Valley, right near Albany, the state capital. That confluence, that bottleneck, was historically, economically, and militarily crucial. It linked the entire interior to the sea.
Before we get into the history, let's stay on that wilderness for a minute, the whole forever wild area. This is where New York earns its Empire State reputation, not just in finance, but in conservation. It really set a national precedent.
The commitment to the Adirondacks is stunning, and the sheer scale of it often surprises people.
Yeah.
The Adirondack Park was established early, back in 1892.
Right.
And critically, it was granted state constitutional protection in 1894 to remain forever wild.
And what does forever wild actually mean in legal terms?
It means it cannot be sold, leased, or converted. It's protected at the highest level of state law.
And here's where the comparison really puts its size in context. That constitutional protection applies to an area that is actually larger than Yellowstone, Everglades, Glacier, and Grand Canyon National Parks.
Combined. Think about that for a moment. That is a massive, roughly 6 million acre tract of protected land defining the entire northern half of the state. You have these vast tracts of wilderness and small towns that exist, less than a 5-hour drive from Midtown Manhattan.
It's a fundamental tension, isn't it? The human-made urban marvel and the natural wild empire.
It is. And while the Adirondacks steal the headlines, this commitment to preservation extends to other areas, too. It shows a really holistic approach to conservation.
Right.
We can't overlook the Catskill Park. It's a still massive 700,000 acres, and it was also protected in 1885 legislation. It's a crucial ecosystem, home to about 400 black bears, deer, minks, fishers. It functions as this vital buffer and natural resource for that upstate-downstate transition zone.
And we also have to recognize the deep history of preserving the state's most famous natural feature, Niagara Falls.
Niagara Falls State Park is the oldest state park in the U.S. It was established in 1885 via eminent domain. And that fact, that use of eminent domain for preservation, it speaks to this deep, long-standing commitment to state-led conservation, often overriding private interests.
That's a very early defining characteristic of New York governance.
It really is.
Structurally, New York has another geographic claim that reinforces this duality. It's the only state that borders both the Great Lakes Erie and Ontario and the Atlantic Ocean.
And that water adjacency shapes its climate dramatically. The variations are just stark. Downstate New York, so NYC and Long Island, it falls under a humid subtropical climate.
Okay, why is that?
It's thanks to its lower elevation, its proximity to the Atlantic Ocean, and relatively lower latitude compared to points further north. They get those hot, humid summers and relatively mild but cold, damp winters.
Now compare that immediately with the rest of the state.
Upstate New York is a more classic, humid continental climate. You get warm summers, often really comfortable temperatures, but long, genuinely cold and often brutal winters.
And the lake affects snow.
Oh, absolutely. Western New York, near the Great Lakes, is infamous for the dramatic effects of lake-effect snow, especially in a place called the Tug Hill region. It can accumulate staggering amounts of snowfall when that cold air passes over the warmer, unfrozen Lake Ontario.
This contrast creates a fascinating modern paradox that the sources emphasize, one that relates directly to climate change.
It's a profound contradiction. So downstate New York is acutely vulnerable. We saw that with the destruction from Hurricane Sandy in 2012. It brought record-high storm surge, and it forced these major discussions about building coastal seawalls and barriers.
At the same time,
the Buffalo and Western New York area is being described in the source material as a potential climate change haven.
A climate change haven. That phrase suggests a future where this region, with abundant fresh water from the Great Lakes, moderate summers, and existing infrastructure, becomes uniquely attractive for climate migration.
Exactly. So the state is dealing with this existential threat of rising sea levels downstate, even commissioning a $1 billion research center on Governor's Island to address the crisis.
Right.
And yet, a huge portion of the state simultaneously offers relative climate stability. This geographical split vulnerability versus stability is only going to intensify that upstate-downstate tension moving forward.
So the geography provided the raw materials and the location, but the history is what truly forged the Empire State. Let's trace that journey, starting with the original inhabitants who shaped the land before any Europeans arrived.
Well, prior to European contact, the land was sophisticatedly managed by major tribal nations. You had the Algonquian tribes, like the Lenape and Mohicans who occupy the coast and the Hudson Valley.
Okay.
And further inland were the Iroquois tribes that formed the powerful Haudenosaunee, or the Iroquois Confederacy.
You had the Six Nations.
Exactly, comprising the Mohawk, Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, and later the Tuscarora. These 6 nations held immense political and military dominance across the region.
And it's important to recognize that the earliest conflicts weren't just European versus indigenous. There were also these really complex trade wars that redefined the region's demography.
That's where the Beaver Wars come in. They ran from about 1640 to 1680. The Iroquois waged these extensive campaigns across the Northeast and Midwest, often against Algonquian tribes. And their goal was simple economic control. securing more land for trapping to dominate the lucrative fur trade.
That economic motivation completely changed the landscape itself, didn't it?
It did. I mean, the intensity of the trapping during the beaver wars resulted in most large game animals, especially the beaver, being hunted out of the region entirely.
Before full European settlement had even really begun.
Exactly. This desperate fight for resource control defined the geopolitical landscape when the European powers arrived.
Speaking of arrival, the initial recorded exploration came in 1524.
Yes. Giovanni de Verrazzano, sailing for France, he entered New York Bay, and he described the area as a deep delta that could accommodate every kind of ship.
But the Dutch were the ones who stayed.
They were. Henry Hudson's 1609 voyage for the Dutch East India Company led to the colony of New Netherland in 1621.
And they set up posts that are still crucial cities today.
Absolutely. The key posts included Fort Nassau in 1614 near Albany, later replaced by Fort Orange, and of course New Amsterdam, established in 1625, which, became New York City.
But that Dutch identity was erased when the English took over, right?
Not entirely erased, but the controls certainly shifted. The English seized the colony in 1664, renaming it the Province of New York.
And there was that brief period where the Dutch got it back.
A very brief interlude in 1673. They recaptured the city, renamed it New Orange, but it was definitively returned to the English in 1674. The English rule was final, but that multi-ethnic, trade-focused, tolerant legacy of New Netherland that profoundly shaped the colony's character.
Okay, so let's fast forward to the American Revolution. New York becomes this crucial stage for conflict.
It was a true hotbed of rebellion. The Sons of Liberty organized right there in New York City in the 1760s, driven by opposition to the Stamp Act.
But it was also full of loyalists.
A substantial number. Because it was such a central commercial hub with strong trade links to Britain, it housed many wealthy, influential loyalists who wanted to remain under the crown.
That split identity shows up clearly in the vote for independence, which is a detail I think a lot of people miss.
It's a crucial fact. New York was the only colony that did not initially vote for independence.
The only one.
Though its delegates, recognizing the inevitable tide, they quickly endorsed the Declaration on July 9, 1776. But this internal division made the war uniquely brutal on New York soil.
And the state paid a heavy price.
For approximately one-third of all Revolutionary War battles took place in New York. The war started badly for the revolutionaries here. The Battle of Long Island was a devastating loss. And the British occupied New York City for the entire war.
And this occupation led to one of the most sobering and just shocking statistics of the entire war.
This needs to be understood clearly. More American combatants died on the notorious British prison ships anchored in Wallabout Bay, mostly from disease and neglect, than were killed in combat in every single battle of the war combined.
That's unbelievable. It just underscores the brutal toll the war took on New York specifically.
It really does. But despite those early losses, New York hosted the crucial turning point.
The Battle of Saratoga.
The Battle of Saratoga in 1777. The capture of a major British army there was the decisive victory. That success is what convinced France to formally ally with the revolutionaries, securing the money and military support that made victory possible.
Let's talk about the immediate post-war consequences, especially for the original inhabitants. The Iroquois Confederacy, having largely sided with the British, they suffered a terrible fate.
The post-war retaliation was swift and devastating. 4 of the 6 Iroquois nations had fought for the crown. In 1779, the Sullivan Expedition was ordered.
And what was that?
It was an intentional action to break their power. It destroyed nearly 50 Iroquois villages, their croplands, their winter food stores. After the war, these pro-British Iroquois were largely forced out of New York and resettled in Canada.
And this leads directly to the next phase of the Empire State's rise. The sources state that 5 million acres of former Iroquois territory were then put up for sale by New York State.
This is the critical, often overlooked, historical link. The mass seizure and sale of this immense tract of land immediately fueled the settlement boom in upstate New York.
So it provided the state with both the land and the initial capital for everything that came next.
It was the foundational wealth that would later allow New York to contemplate and then execute the colossal engineering project that defined its destiny, the Erie Canal.
Right. And that momentum of ascendancy continued. New York City even served briefly as the political capital.
Indeed. NYC was the first national capital until 1790. George Washington was inaugurated there. The Bill of Rights was drafted there. But the real engine, the permanent source of the nickname, was the Erie Canal.
Let's unpack the scale of this. It wasn't just a ditch. It was a total engineering revolution.
It truly was. It was championed by Governor DeWitt Clinton, which led to its early derisive nickname, Clinton's Ditch.
Ha, right.
Construction started in 1817, and it opened in 1825. Imagine a 363-mile waterway connecting the Hudson River near Albany directly to the Great Lakes at Buffalo. It had to navigate an elevation change of over 500 feet using a complex system of 83 locks.
So what was the immediate economic impact?
Transformative. Before the canal, shipping goods overland from Buffalo to NYC was incredibly slow and prohibitively expensive. The canal immediately slashed the cost of moving freight by up to 90%.
90%.
And travel time was reduced from weeks to mere days. It gave New York an incomparable advantage over competing ports like Boston, Philadelphia, and Baltimore.
So it effectively gave New York City control over all the commerce pouring in from the growing Midwest, solidifying it as the nation's primary economic artery.
Precisely. It allowed cities like Buffalo and Rochester to just explode in size and prosperity, linking the entire continental interior to the deepwater port of New York. This unparalleled connectivity fueled a massive economic boom.
And we can still see the corporate legacy of that today. The sources list this incredible roster of companies founded during that period.
We can. I mean, take American Express. It was founded in 1850 in Buffalo as an express mail business, capitalizing directly on the rapid transport system the canal enabled.
And then it grew into a financial powerhouse.
Or look at Rochester, where companies like Kodak were founded. Rochester flourished specifically because the canal provided cheap, reliable transport for raw materials and finished goods. This integrated economic geography, manufacturing upstate, finance, and shipping downstate. That is the literal definition of the Empire State.
So if the history is the engine, the people who poured through its ports are the fuel. New York has served as the greatest gateway for human migration in U.S. history.
The scale is immense, and it began long before the federal government even took over. Since the early 19th century, New York City has been the largest port of entry. The state managed its own intake through its first permanent depot, Castle Garden.
Castle Garden, a lot of people forget about that one. Operational from 1855 to 1890, and it processed an astounding number of people.
Over 8 million immigrants passed through Castle Garden. That was 2 out of every 3 U.S. immigrants during that time.
2 out of 3.
When the federal government assumed control, they moved the operation to the site we all know, Ellis Island.
Which opened in 1892 and is, the more famous symbol of the American dream.
It processed over 12 million immigrants until it closed in 1954. To put that in context, more than 100 million Americans today can trace their ancestry to immigrants who passed through that single inspection station.
It's arguably the single most important piece of real estate in American demographic history.
You could absolutely make that case.
It also has that bizarre, slightly comical legal dispute over which state it's actually in.
The fight between New York and New Jersey over the island is legendary. The Supreme Court finally settled it in 1998. The ruling determined that the original 3.3 acres of the island where the main hall sits are in New York.
Okay.
But the rest of the island, the 27.5 acres added later by landfill, that was ruled to be in New Jersey.
So most of Ellis Island is actually New Jersey.
The vast majority. It's a perfect geographic illustration of how complex and layered this area is.
That bizarre detail really sets the stage for the complexity of its modern demography. Let's look at the sheer numbers this gateway produced.
New York is still a leading recipient of global migrants. It has the second largest international immigrant population in the country, 4.2 million as of 2008. And the population is overwhelmingly urbanized. 92% of residents live in an urban area.
Which creates unique challenges, and the resulting diversity is just exceptional.
It's unparalleled. New York is home to the largest Jewish population outside Israel. It also has the second largest Asian American and the fourth largest Black or African American populations in the U.S.
Let's shine a spotlight on the neighborhoods, because the statistics there really illustrate the density of global cultures.
Queens is consistently recognized as the most ethnically diverse county in the United States and the most ethnically diverse urban area in the world. It's a hub for South Asian, East Asian, and huge Indian populations.
And Brooklyn.
Brooklyn is just as vital. It houses the largest Jamaican-American population, and Bedford-Stuyvesant has the largest Black population of sub-Saharan descent in the U.S.
I find the trend of the Chinese population particularly interesting because it shows how economic growth pushes demographic change.
The Chinese population is the fastest growing nationality group, and New York is their top destination. And this growth, it isn't just confined to the traditional Chinatowns. It's rapidly expanding eastward into the suburbs of Nassau County on Long Island.
A huge sign of economic integration.
A massive sign.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Mexican Americans have established themselves as one of the largest Latino groups across the state, particularly upstate in agriculture and industry.
Given this staggering convergence of cultures, the linguistic depth must be a challenge, but also a tremendous asset.
It is the ultimate expression of the melting pot idea. I mean, while about 70% of residents speak only English at home, over 30%, that's nearly 6 million people, speak another language.
Spanish being the most common, I assume?
By a wide margin, but that only scratches the surface.
Okay, here's the aha moment that connects back to the sheer scale of global migration we discussed. The estimated number of languages spoken in the city.
New York City is estimated to host as many as 800 languages.
800?
800. This fact solidifies its status as the single most linguistically diverse city in the world. Imagine the infrastructure required for the public school system, for the courts. It's a challenge, but it also makes the city this unique, indispensable hub for global commerce.
It truly is a microcosm of the entire globe. And moving to social dynamism, New York has also been the cradle for massive social change, particularly for LGBTQ+ rights.
Absolutely. The state legalized same-sex marriage relatively early in 2011, and New York City is often described as the gay capital of the world because of its sustained importance to the LGBTQ+ socio-political ecosystem.
The history here is pivotal. The Stonewall riots. The sources call it the gay capital of the world. Why New York? Why not, say, San Francisco? What made it stick?
New York's enduring role stems from the cultural moment of the Stonewall riots in June 1969 in Greenwich Village. The sources emphasize that while other cities had LGBTQ+ activity, Stonewall was the watershed event. It fundamentally shifted the goal from assimilation to liberation, and it really started the modern political gay rights movement.
And New York had the infrastructure to support that.
Exactly. Because of New York's density and its media and financial centers, it provided the necessary scale and infrastructure for that movement to take root, organize, and quickly gain national visibility.
And the location is now the Stonewall National Monument. The activism continues on a massive scale.
Immense. World Pride NYC 2019, commemorating the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, attracted 4 million attendees. And the Brooklyn Liberation March in 2020, drawing up to 20,000 participants supporting Black transgender lives, just highlights the continued evolving importance of New York as a place for social and political protest.
So the people and the history have culminated in this economic engine of just unbelievable power. The most effective way to grasp the scale of the economy is to compare New York State not to other U.S. states, but to independent nations.
That's the necessary frame of reference. New York State's GDP was $2 trillion in 2022. If the state of New York were its own country, it would rank as the 11th largest economy worldwide.
Alongside nations like Canada or Russia.
Exactly. And when you drill down to just the New York City metro area, the concentration of wealth is even more staggering.
What are those numbers?
The NYC metro area's gross metropolitan product of over $2.16 trillion is larger than the GDP of all but 9 nations globally. It's an overwhelming center of gravity.
This brings us to the core of the Empire State designation: Wall Street and finance.
Lower Manhattan is the 3rd largest central business district in the U.S., anchored by the critical exchanges. The New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ are the world's largest and 2nd largest stock exchanges, respectively.
The twin pillars of global capitalism.
They are. But there's an important distinction to make. While Lower Manhattan is the financial core, Midtown Manhattan is technically the largest central business district in the world by sheer physical size.
So finance is supreme, but the sources also detail a major shift toward high-tech industries.
New York has been rapidly evolving. Silicon Alley is the term for the tech and entrepreneurship ecosystem in the metro area, and this growth is bolstered by a key geographic advantage. New York City sits at the terminus of several transatlantic fiber optic trunk lines.
Crucial high-speed connectivity. But the tech growth is another area of that great contradiction. They're making a deliberate, massive investment to foster a major high-tech manufacturing sector upstate.
This is the rise of what's called Tech Valley. It's a significant development area, Albany, Saratoga County, and it focuses on nanotechnology, digital electronics, and microchip manufacturing.
Things that need space and resources you can't get in the city.
Precisely. They require massive infrastructure, specifically access to vast amounts of water and electricity, which upstate provides more readily than downstate.
And the case of global foundries provides a perfect illustration of this strategy working.
It does. GlobalFoundries, a major semiconductor company, physically moved its corporate headquarters in 2021 from Silicon Valley, California, to its most advanced manufacturing facility in Malta, New York.
Wow, so they're really building two different but complementary tech economies.
That's the strategy: high-tech manufacturing upstate and intellectual and software capital downstate. The $2 billion Cornell and Technion Applied Sciences Graduate School on Roosevelt Island was built with a specific mission to turn NYC into a premier technology capital.
Now, let's address the state's role as a financial engine for the nation, because this sets up our final question. These sources contain important data on New York's fiscal relationship with the federal government.
This is a critical point. Because New York is such a prodigious engine of wealth generation, especially through taxes tied to Wall Street, it acts as a massive net contributor to the national treasury.
So what do the numbers look like for that imbalance?
As of 2013, the state received only 91 cents in services for every dollar it sent in federal taxes. That ranked it 46th in the nation. New York generates enormous national wealth, and much of it is redistributed to other states.
A defining characteristic of its empire status.
It is.
And that diversified economy also relies heavily on non-finance sectors, particularly creative industries and agriculture.
Creative industries are a growing share of employment. New York offers generous tax incentives, up to $420 million annually, for filmmaking. And the film and entertainment industry contributed nearly $9 billion to the NYC economy as of 2015.
And the success of the I Love New York campaign has meant tourism is now a dominant sector.
It's projected that by 2025, tourism will be the state's second largest industry. And as of 2013, 4 of the world's top 10 most visited tourist attractions were located in New York: Times Square, Central Park, Niagara Falls, and Grand Central Terminal.
That density is unmatched. But the strength of the agricultural sector, particularly upstate, often surprises people.
It does. New York agriculture is robust and vital. The state is a top 5 national producer for things like maple syrup, apples, cherries, and dairy products.
In cabbage.
And cabbage. It is, in fact, the largest producer of cabbage in the entire U.S.
I did not know that.
Plus, New York is the 3rd largest wine producer by volume in the country, supported by 320 wineries. It just reinforces this idea of New York as a state of profound contrast.
Finally, we must acknowledge the modern shocks that have tested New York's resilience in the 21st century.
The September 11th attacks in 2001 were an inflection point. 2 hijacked planes hit the Twin Towers, leading to the collapse of 3 buildings and the deaths of 2,753 people. The rebuilding, especially One World Trade Center at the symbolic height of 1,776 feet, really symbolizes that resilience.
And then the environmental shock that forced the state to confront its coastal vulnerability.
Hurricane Sandy in 2012 was a major catastrophe for the downstate region. It brought record-high storm surge and extensive destruction. This event immediately prompted extensive discussions about large-scale coastal defenses like seawalls, forcing New York to rapidly adapt to the undeniable reality of climate change.
This immense economy and complicated geography require an equally complex governmental structure. Let's look at how the Empire State governs itself, starting with the basic foundation.
Well, the structure follows the standard U.S. model: executive, a bicameral legislature, and a judiciary. The state is divided into 62 counties, which are then split into cities and towns.
But despite this unified structure, the sources make it clear that those geographical and cultural schisms create these persistent movements to physically break away.
Secession is an enduring political fantasy in New York. It reflects the deep tensions between the highly liberal, dense downstate and the conservative, sparsely populated upstate areas.
Right.
Proposals have ranged from creating a separate state of Long Island, or a state called Niagara in the west, to even having Staten Island secede from New York City.
And it's all fueled by frustration over taxes and representation.
Always.
A unique legal status that separates New York from many other states is its stance on capital punishment.
New York reintroduced it in 1995, but it was declared unconstitutional by the state's highest court in 2004. The state formally disestablished death row in 2008, so no execution has taken place in New York since 1963.
Moving to politics, New York is generally a democratic plurality state, but the internal reality is far more nuanced.
It's very nuanced. While the urban centers are Democratic strongholds, upstate rural areas remain generally conservative and favor Republicans. But the critical insight here is not internal politics. It's New York's national political influence, which is derived purely from its financial power.
This is the ultimate expression of that duality. It funds the apparatus of political conflict across the nation.
Exactly. New York City is year after year the single most important source of political fundraising in the U.S. for both major parties.
For both parties.
For both. The sources demonstrate this perfectly. 4 of the top 5 ZIP codes in the entire nation for political contributions are in Manhattan.
And the most stunning example is that Upper East Side ZIP code 1021.
That ZIP code 1021 generated the most money for both George W. Bush and Al Gore in the 2000 presidential campaign.
So the money is basically agnostic. It perfectly encapsulates how New York City serves as the financial engine for both sides of the aisle.
Capital transcends local politics. It positions New York as the national funding hub.
Speaking of presidential politics, New York also has this highly unusual history of producing national candidates.
New York has been the home state for both major party nominees in 3 separate presidential elections.
Yeah.
1904, 1944, and 2016. That's highly unusual for any single state. And of course, the UN headquarters has been in Midtown Manhattan since 1952, which further cements the city's role as a global diplomatic center.
Let's transition to the intellectual capital of the state. Its higher education system, it's absolutely massive.
It is. New York hosts approximately 200 colleges and universities. The public systems are enormous. You have the State University of New York, or SUNY, which is a network of 64 campuses, including flagships like Buffalo and Stony Brook.
And then there's the equally vital CUNY system.
The City University of New York, CUNY, is the largest urban university system in the United States. This dual system, SUNY for the state, CUNY for the hyperdensity, it just underscores the dual nature of New York's governance.
And the private institutions are among the most prestigious in the world.
It has 2 Ivy League universities, Columbia, Cornell, plus other world-renowned schools like NYU and Syracuse. And for the arts, it boasts Juilliard in Manhattan and the Eastman School of Music in Rochester. And we have to mention the U.S. Military Academy at West Point.
This investment in education shows up in the raw data, too.
In 2013, New York spent more on public education per pupil than any other state in the nation. It demonstrates a deep, continuous commitment to maintaining a high-skilled workforce.
Finally, we turn to the rich sports heritage. There are few places with this density of professional teams, but even here, we find a classic New York contradiction.
It is a powerhouse, but the geography of sports logistics creates one of the state's most famous ironies for football fans.
Right.
New York is represented by 3 NFL teams, but only the Buffalo Bills actually play their games within the state.
The Giants and the Jets play in New Jersey.
They do, representing the metropolitan area. It's another example of the porous boundaries of the downstate economy.
And beyond the NFL.
2 Major League Baseball teams, Yankees and Mets, 3 NHL franchises, 2 NBA teams, and the U.S. Open Tennis Championships is held annually in Queens.
And the state's Olympic history is perhaps its most unique claim to sports fame.
Lake Placid, nestled upstate in the Adirondacks, hosted the Winter Olympics twice, in 1932 and 1980. This makes it one of only 3 cities globally to have done so.
And 1980, of course, is immortalized by the Miracle on Ice,
where the American amateur hockey team defeated the heavily favored Soviet team, a moment of profound national pride, hosted right in the Empire State's wild northern reaches.
We've traveled across the immense geographic divides, detailed the impact of the Erie Canal, watched the endless stream of global talent pass through Ellis Island, and analyzed the immense economic density of Wall Street, right up to the modern rise of Tech Valley.
The core takeaway here is that New York State is defined by its extremes, geographical, cultural, and financial. Its history, fueled by that crucial infrastructure like the Erie Canal, created a definitive blueprint for American economic expansion. And that head start was sustained by its enduring, continuous role as a gateway for global talent and capital.
It constantly exports its capital, its talent, and its culture across the world and across the nation, making it the undisputed empire state.
And that leads us to a final provocative thought for you to consider, tying back to that contradiction we established in the economic section. Yeah. We noted that New York runs a massive fiscal imbalance with the federal government, receiving only 91 cents for every dollar it sends in federal taxes. So given its immense local GDP and its overwhelming global influence, serving as the funding apparatus for both political parties nationally, how much of the Empire State's identity relies on generating and sending national wealth, often to regions with which it politically clashes?
What is the true cost and responsibility of maintaining its position as the world's financial and cultural capital while simultaneously navigating these acute internal struggles between upstate and downstate?
A question that is the state itself. the empire state of contradictions.
That's all for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.